Welcome to Deep Look, Ultiworld's weekly radio show about the current state of Ultimate. I'm the host and the editor, Charlie Eisenhood. Joining me is Ultiworld senior editor Keith Rayner. It is Wednesday, April 19th, and we got the first week into conferences all wrapped up. A few teams have already made nationals, Keith.
Yeah, we are officially in the college postseason, Charlie. My team has already competed. We qualified for regionals, as did everybody in our conferences. We'll talk more about that in a little bit. But yeah, let's recognize the teams that have already qualified for nationals, as there is a nice little group of them, all coming from D3 women's. We'll add a couple of D3 men's this weekend as well, and some more from the women's division too. But teams that have already qualified. Out of the Atlantic Coast, Catholic takes the win there. Great Lakes, Knox, in North Central, 3 teams. Carleton, who's just been so strong this year, Michigan Tech and St. Olaf, they'll all advance from North Central. On the Northwest, Portland and Whitman both advance. Colorado College, a team I don't think I don't know if people knew they were going to play D3. They were D1 nationals not that long ago, like 5-6 years ago, something like that. They win the South Central in a stacked region. So impressive stuff for Colorado College. And then finally, Occidental in the Southwest. And this year they actually got to play what could be one of the low-key great rivalries in college ultimate between Occidental and Claremont. So many years they had to decide it just by who was higher in the rankings. There were only 2 teams in the region.
Dumb.
It was so bad. Now they played for it. I think it went to double game point. Occidental gets the win. So way more exciting this way. But all of those teams have already qualified for the D3 College Championships. Congratulations to them and their fans.
Shout out. We're not going to go through all of the results from.
You don't want to just
read
them one by one?
Oh boy, that'd be quite a show, wouldn't it?
Should we have the editors just do a credit scroll? Maybe just for the teams that got eliminated, and we'll play Sarah McLachlan.
I will remember you. Michigan State beats Michigan over in the Michigan Conference in men's D1. That's pretty surprising, Keith. I mean, I don't put I say it every year. I don't put a lot of stock in these conferences results. Teams don't always travel with a full contingent. Teams that know they're going to go to regionals often are playing depth and working on stuff and not stacking lines. So I'm not too worked up about it, but it's still Michigan kind of fallen off hard this year, huh?
Yeah, I mean, even if Michigan's at the point where they're holding stuff back because they're worried about beating Michigan State at regionals, that already says something to me about where Magnum's at. Concerning loss, I agree with you. I don't put too much stock in conferences results, especially when things are already sewn up. But you like to see teams performing well, especially when they're in some of the competitive environments. So you look at out in Cascadia in both D1 men's and D1 women's. You got multiple ranked teams there. So seeing how they shook out, you get UBC winning both conferences. So it's intriguing to take a look at some of these competitive areas for results. Ohio State, the men's division, didn't win their conference either. So Michigan and Ohio State, 2 schools intrinsically linked forever, neither wins their conference despite being the more reputable team. Case Western gets the win there.
How about everything going to basically to seed and to the power rankings out in men's New England? All those really, really good teams in Greater New England. UMass over Vermont over Brown. In Metro Boston, Tufts over Northeastern. So pretty much going to expectations and, good games. And obviously it's going to be just brutal at conferences, but should be a lot of fun to see. Carleton over Minnesota at the Northwoods. How much money would you
put on regionals going to seed in New England? What kind of odds you need to bet on that?
I think to power ranking seeding.
Yeah, at the top. I don't get, who cares? Not
I think the odds of that are plus 150.
Okay.
Right?
That's not too bad.
Carleton over Minnesota, Northwoods, and D1. Interesting. I
wouldn't be surprised if that holds. Mentioned Cascadia and in D1 women's, basically that went how we would expect. UBC, Washington, Oregon, Western, and Victoria. Western, Victoria still really close together, but that could be a defining matchup come regionals. So that particular pairing is somebody to keep an eye on. But Oregon also is not necessarily separating themselves. I think they had a good loss to UBC, but otherwise they were pretty close with those two teams. So Oregon may be on shaky ground after a really strong start to the season. Like you said, we're not putting too much stock in these, but you're got to be a little concerned given that they haven't had the best run at the end of the regular season either.
Let's keep an eye on this. UT Dallas over Texas in D1 women's 6-5 final score. I don't know what's going on there. It must have been windy.
That could be a key pick for our regionals competition. Very key.
And so, yeah, still waiting on a lot of upcoming conferences. Got to see how UNC Charlotte does coming up here in their Carolina conference. So that should be fun. Before we move on to an exciting rest of the show, we're going to have Amanda Dallas, the new Premier Ultimate League commissioner, on. She's also the commissioner and founder of the Major League Quadball, which used to be Quidditch. So looking forward to talking with Amanda in a little bit. We're also going to be doing our AUDL preview show today as we get ready for the AUDL season, which starts in about 10 days. But before we move on from college, next week we'll focus on regionals. Keith, a little bit chaotic leading up to conferences. We didn't get conference to regionals bid clarity really at any point, and it's been a little touch and go with communication with teams. And I know there's still question marks about some of the regional tournaments. How was your conferences? Let's just have that straight question. How was your conferences?
Let me start by saying my team played pretty well. I mean, I feel pretty good about where we were at, especially considering we were missing three of our best players. Finished fourth, so not exactly standout results, but we have a tough conference too. So all that said, though, there was definitely a sense of a little bit of disorganization at conferences that felt like an extension of the lead-in. Not having the schedules until really late. I think we got ours either Thursday night or Friday morning, something like that in the overnights. Not knowing the bid situation, which I guess I should have known, is my fault. In the women's division this year, there's a new rule. Basically, there is no regional scaling up to the first 16 teams or whatever. If you have 16 or fewer teams, everybody's going to regionals. Everybody qualifies, rather. It's up to the teams whether or not they'll accept those bids. So that also was a bit of a surprise. You think all year, hey, we got a place in this place to make our regionals. Usually our regionals is 8-10 teams, so we know we got to finish in the top half of the region. And then all of a sudden it's it doesn't actually matter how we place aside from seeding as far as going to regionals. So that was a bit of a surprise. Although that part a little more on me to know, I guess, as a coach. But also, the field site is okay. I know field site issues are kind of unavoidable, so I won't go too far down that path. But mainly, there was an issue where the wrong cap times got communicated prior to the games. Then the game schedule was changing in the middle of the day, and then that happened again on Sunday. And then there was a field that was double booked, so we suddenly had an extra bye in the middle of our rounds. We lost in semifinals and then had to play a backdoor semifinal, and we had to take a 2-hour break between that. And as did the team we were playing. Just neither team was playing during that period of time, and that we didn't find that out until the last minute. So those kinds of things, did those ruin our weekend or make it so nobody had any fun? No, but they just kind of added up over time. Figuring out, hey, what are we going to do for a 2-hour bye when it's not like our men's team is at these fields or whatever for us to go watch them and root for. So it's kind of a weird spot to be in, and felt like an extension of some of the disorganization that came prior. And it all just sounds to me like everything wasn't getting finalized until the last minute. And there was somebody who had to approve, I don't know if it's the protocol, the approval process for making format changes or schedule changes. If the TD on site has to go to a USAU and say, hey, this is the new thing we want to do, and then somebody has to get back to them, if that was causing the lag. But it definitely felt like something was a little off, and that there was a lot of last minute stuff happening, and that was causing details to slip through the cracks.
Interesting. Yeah. I mean, I've been a long proponent of trying to figure out a better way to make these tournaments, which is the majority of the postseason for so many teams. Conferences, a lot of teams get knocked out, right? And then with regionals, those events need to be really good. Now, they're not going to be nationals good, but you need to think about how do you make them a better experience for everybody, because that's what's going to get people excited and recruiting people and, growth of the sport. Anyway, I know it's a tough time with USAU dealing with interim college director and whatnot.
And they put on 70, they helped put on 70 tournaments or whatever over one weekend. Like it's a pretty massive undertaking. And without an incredibly dedicated and large volunteer staff, they probably wouldn't be able to even do what they did. But B, you're not going to see a lot of improvement. If you had clear and engaged conference coordinators at every level, then a lot of this stuff could probably be pushed onto them. But because USA Ultimate wants to have uniformity and make sure that everything looks the same pretty much, as far as formats and everybody's following the same guidelines, it has to go through them, and that just creates a bottleneck. And it's tough to do anything without dumping more resources on it. I do love the idea, though, of having a bigger spectacle of regionals. Like if regionals felt like more like a mini nationals, that I think that would be pretty exciting, because it doesn't feel like that right now. It basically feels like a regular tournament until you get to the last 2 rounds or so, depending on where you are and how many bids you have. But I think that would be a really engaging thing for a lot of players who otherwise are never really exposed to that environment and don't engage with the sport in that way. I don't know how to make that happen, but I could see that being a worthwhile investment, trying to make regionals feel like a bigger deal.
Well, USAU has to stop trying to centralize it all, and they need to put more expectations on local disc organizations with whom they need to have a positive working relationship to allow that to happen. It's very straightforward, I think, actually. I mean, it doesn't make it easy, but it's clear what you need to do. Anyway, let's move on. AUDL. Here we go. We are 10 days away from the start of the season, and it's going to be a fun one. We've got the league opener. We've already discussed this. Seattle at Salt Lake. That's Friday, April 28th. So I guess we're actually 9 days away from the start of the season. And then a pretty nice slate on Saturday, April 29th. I think probably the marquee matchup that weekend, certainly DC versus Carolina at Carolina. So that's a nice way to kick things off. A couple of teams with championship aspirations, I would say. And the question I want to begin with, Keith, is who is in the championship contender tier? We know the New York Empire trying to become a dynasty, trying to win their third straight championship. They basically bring back the entire band and, maybe solidify their depth a little bit, in that 20 to 27 range, and really just look like a team that you're going to have to reckon with for the entire season yet again. They probably have the best top end in the league. They're among the deepest teams in the league. We know that they will be a favorite to repeat again. So beyond New York, Keith, who is in the championship conversation?
Here it must be AUDL season again, because here we are having the same conversation. New York Empire, big favorites. Can anybody take them down? Like, been here before. But I do think we actually have a pretty compelling cast of challengers this year, and I think I'm willing to go 4 teams deep as far as including New York, teams that feel like they have a real shot at contending for a title this year. We got to start with the team everybody's talking about, though, Charlie. The DC Breeze. What an offseason. Tremendous slate of pickups for them. They have a lot of talent coming in, and they were already a great contender as far as a team that matched up well with New York, has a great history of challenging them. Now they're bringing in Cole Jurek. They've got an extra Norbaum. I lose track of which Norbaums they have. Thomas Edmonds is coming over. He's like one of the biggest, most popular player among players. Like, I find when you talk to other elite level players, like who's somebody people don't talk about enough, Thomas Edmonds is one of the top names that comes to mind. And they didn't really lose much. So there's a lot of reason to be excited about the additions for DC. That's not even the full list of strong players. Andrew Roy's coming in, Charlie McCutcheon. I
think you can't overlook Andrew Roy. Like,
no,
he's basically going to take Rowan's spot on the O-line, right? Because Rowan's moving to D.
So DC is a great foil for New York, and it's unfortunate that only one of those teams can make championship weekend, but at least make for a compelling rivalry and certainly some interesting regular season matchups. And we got to start with DC as far as contenders go.
I think you didn't even mention Joe Merrill, who's going to be a really nice re-addition for them. This O-line is going to be very formidable. They are going to move some pieces off of there it's going to make it just that much easier for them. And this was already a good O-line last year, but you think about the chemistry that some of these players have already built together playing on truck stop and with the same, kind of like coaching staff. I just feel like, Daryl Stanley's already such a talented coaching mind. Now he really has the personnel to truly compete with New York for the top of the division. And it is not a foregone conclusion that New York will get out of the East. You think about how close it was last year. They had some very tight games during the regular season. And then, DC was right there. They were right there. They absolutely could have won on the road at New York to take the spot of championship weekend. So it's funny because it's possible that New York's toughest playoff game will be the East final against DC. That will almost certainly be the matchup. Maybe in New York, maybe in DC. That's going to come down to a couple key games in the regular season. DC has the disadvantage of having to play Carolina twice. New York has to go on the road far and play Colorado and Salt Lake on a back-to-back. Those are not going to be easy games to win at altitude. But, maybe it comes down to who has home field advantage.
Hey, you're mentioning the Colorado road trip. Colorado, I think, is another team that I would include in this category. We saw them have a great debut season last year. They added some pretty good upgrades for them as well. So I think this Colorado team is going to be very competitive. They're going to learn the lessons of last year. So I think that you got to mark them as the number 3 team. I really like. This is probably going to go under the radar. I know people are going to be talking about Calvin Stoughton, but I think Noah Kuhlman is going to have a very, very good year for them. We know Colorado's offense is great. Kuhlman brings a great defensive tenacity for that team. So I like Colorado to be even better than they were last year, not just from the improvement from the natural roster, but from their additions as well. And I think that they're in this tier with DC and New York.
Yeah, I think people are going to remember them kind of laying an egg at championship weekend, but those are the kinds of games that you learn from, and they've definitely gotten better. That's the biggest thing. They were already good, but they are now going to be better, and I think it's going to offer them the opportunity to shore up the defensive line a little bit more. I really like their chances to disrupt opposing O-lines. Cody Spicer, fantastic. And I'm with you there. I think the only other team, Keith, that I put in this championship contender category, like a team that I really think could actually win, is Carolina. They're only 2 years removed from winning. And why can't they win again? I feel like they have enough personnel to do it. I'm a little concerned about their depth. I'm a little bit concerned about their defense. They lose David Richardson, who honestly has been a really important D-line player for them for a long time, even though he was way up there in age, even the last couple of seasons. Do they have the guys to go out there and get the key blocks? Now, they're going to waltz through this terrible South Division. That's not even a question. Maybe they're going to have a tough road games at Atlanta and at Austin, but, with Dallas and Houston just being bottom feeders, I don't really think that they're going to have too much trouble, and they should win their home games pretty comfortably against all the teams in the division. So they're going to get through there. That's all good. The question is, against those top teams at championship weekend, we saw them get a little bit exposed against New York last year. So can they win those games? We're going to get to see that a little more because they're playing DC twice in the regular season.
Charlie, they're getting LSB and Joe White. They're losing Henry Fisher, but that's enough to make up for that loss. And I'm less worried about their depth because you're talking about the best development pipeline in the country, right? They're replete with great college programs and players who can come into the pro leagues with already 8 to 10 years of ultimate experience. I'm not super concerned about their ability to create depth, especially as far as defenders go. And Anders Youngston and Alex Davis are emerging as all AUDL kind of players. So with LSB, Joe White, and those guys, like they have strong handlers. Like I'm ready to buy in on Raleigh. I think the price might be a little low. I think people are feeling a little off from Raleigh last year, or sorry, Carolina. They're Carolina now. So that's why the price is so low. Like I'm not even shopping for the right item. Carolina Flyers, yeah, I think that they're going to be a bit resurgent this year, and the only thing that could hold them down is how good this other top tier of the league is. But I agree, this is where the cliff is. After this, I don't feel like there's another team quite at the level.
Don't forget Ben Snell back. Love to see that.
See, they're getting a new veteran. They got a new old guy.
He's still real solid. I wonder will I think they'll play him on D, but either way, I mean, they have a lot of guys who can kind of play O and D and do a lot of things. It's just, I wonder if they have enough of those pieces to deploy in the right way. So we'll see. Do you put any other teams in the conversation?
No. I mean, there's a couple of teams that like, do I expect those teams to go undefeated against the rest of the field? Probably not, but there's nobody I think has the chops to take those teams down as far as when the key games happen, when it hits the fan,
Sure. So we're going to make our picks for the divisions in a little bit, but I want to kind of focus in on the Central Division for a moment, because Chicago's gotten worse, and kind of every team is a little murky. Like, I think you look at Indy maybe getting a little bit better as they bring back Travis Carpenter this year. And they were a pretty solid team last year, but Chicago loses some key pieces, none bigger than Pavel Giannis, who's headed out to LA now. And, Minnesota's a little worse. Madison's a little worse. It's kind of a murky division. Pittsburgh, I don't know that they've done enough to move up the board in a major way. Who the heck is winning this division?
It's a mess. I mean, this is probably the hardest division to handicap. Because I think that it's pretty competitive, except for one or two teams. I think that you could reasonably construct an order with probably 4 different teams winning, and that gives you a lot of permutations to work with. So I don't know that there's a clear winner at all. I don't know if I should say. Do you want to just go in our predictions here? We can just kind of get all the way into it.
Well, yeah, sure. We might as well start with Central, because it's kind of like a conversation about the division overall.
Yeah, I feel much better about Chicago, having found out that their Nate Goff is going to be back this year, when it looked like they were basically losing like a lot of their top end aside from like Ross Barker. I was concerned. They do look a little bit better. I think they're probably still the most talented team. Minnesota is good at having the kind of balance between them and Indy of talent and getting the most out of that talent. They got used to playing without some of their key guys over the past couple of years. But Charlie, I think this could be the Alley Cats' year.
Wow.
Why not? Right? If the rest of the division is taking a step back, and Indy's bringing back pretty much all the tools that they had last year, we saw some of their younger players really start to take steps forward as well. So I think that they're going to see Indy look a little more deep than what we're used to. So they have the core guys at the top who've shown their ability to produce against even top level competition. They even have a couple guys who I think can kind of be on that all AUDL level at this point, especially if Carpenter's healthy to go with Keegan North. But yeah, I think Indy's actually got a real shot at this. They put together a respectable 500 season last year, but that easily they had some really close games that could have gone the other way. So I think I'm going to take Indy to be the shock winner in the Central this year.
Wow. Well, I think that they're making the playoffs. I definitely think they're making the playoffs. But I'm actually going to stay with Chicago as the division winners here, which, yes, they get worse. But when I look at the actual rosters of all of the teams, I still look at the Chicago team and I say, okay, they still have Paul Arders and Nate Goff. They're picking up Andrew Sjogren from Detroit, who's been a very productive cutter. They still have a lot of solid depth pieces. Now, I definitely am concerned about their offense taking a bit of a step back. But when I look at the rest of the division, it's not like I'm like, oh, wow, they're doomed by this team. I mean, they're probably going to have to grit it out. It's not going to be a 11-1 season. They're going to be like 9-3 or 8-4, and that might be enough to win the division. I think it's going to be absolutely critical to win all your home games, and then you got to be able to pick off one from Indy or Madison or Minnesota on the road. But Minnesota's gotten worse. I don't really see that Madison has enough talent to really make a big push. And when I look at Chicago, I say to myself, okay, like I still see enough high quality players on this roster. I mean, Asher Lance, what an awesome season he had last year. This is still a clear playoff team, and I'm taking them to win the division.
I can't fault it. I feel like I'm a bit out on a limb with Indy, and that's okay. I just think that this is going to be a messy division, and I think that you're going to see these teams beat each other up, and that's also gives an opening for unpredictable results. I've got Indy. I've got Minnesota finish second, and then Chicago. But yeah, it's not like I feel super confident in that order. I certainly would not put any money on this ordering.
I've got Indy getting the 2 spot and Minnesota getting the 3 spot. And, keep in mind with the championship weekend in Minnesota, I mean, the league is going to puppeteer Minnesota to the championship weekend, right? I mean, there's someone's going to break Goff's knee or something in the night.
The fix is in.
Yeah. But we'll get to our full picks for the championship weekend in a little bit, but it's going to be an interesting one. I mean, I think it's going to come down to scheduling and roster availability, and like teams are going to have to travel well for their road trips in this division, because you're not going to be able to send your B squad and hope to win on the road, except at Detroit and maybe at Pittsburgh.
Well, we get 3 Detroit-Pittsburgh matchups, so if Detroit wants to get off the schneid, they're going to get their shot. Why could we get Detroit scheduled against Dallas? Come on, AUDL, give us the toilet bowl. The people want it.
Okay. Can Detroit finally win a game, Keith?
No, they're like maybe worse than ever. I don't know. I mean, I will say there are a bunch of other really bad teams in the league, but the fact that they only get to play Pittsburgh of those bad teams really takes some of the sting out of it. I mean, they need one of those situations where it's like somebody's traveling with their B squad on the road and it's stupid windy or whatever. Yeah, I'm not buying it.
They've lost 62 straight games. And this is shout out to Adam Ruffner for this stat. They only have 8 games where they've finished in that stretch where they finished within 4 goals of their opponent.
If the streak ends or the team folds, I look forward to the inevitable, like, here's what the world was like when the streak began. Like, here's the number 1 chart topping song where the streak began.
Oh no.
Yeah. All right. Let's go out east too. Enough about the dog days of Detroit. Let's talk about some of the best teams in the league. I mean, we can just start at the top. DC or New York. If you have something other than that, I'm gonna be shocked. But who are you picking between those two? I have
those 2 teams. I'm gonna take New York to win in the regular season and win the division and get the home playoff game for the East Final. I just think DC's schedule, they play home and away with New York. They play home and away with Carolina. I feel like they're going to lose at least 2 of those games. And New York, it's like, okay, do you see them losing to Colorado and Salt Lake on the road trip? I mean, I want to say they're going to go 1-1, but it will not surprise me if they go 2-0. I just think that they're like enough better than those teams that they can do it. Depends on how they travel, though.
Yeah, I think that they're probably going to go 1-1 in that trip, and then I think they take one other loss in here. Maybe it's to
I agree,
a better Toronto team.
I think they could drop one to DC.
Yeah, so I'm actually going to take DC to win the division.
Oh, okay.
So I mean, I think there's got to be some complacency coming into New York. I know that
you got to think.
You would think that you would see more of it in the roster turnover, of which there is so little, but there's got to be some sense of complacency coming in there. So I'm picking DC to win, get the hype going. The fans are going to be going crazy. DC is going to be a tough place to play this year.
It's hard to repeat. It's really hard to repeat. Even if you have Jack Williams and Ryan Osgar and Ben Yott and John Randolph and Ben Katz. I mean, this team is stacked, Keith. That's the thing. Like, even if they're complacent, they're still going to win all of their games except maybe against DC and maybe one of those West road trip games. I mean, who are they losing to?
No Gibran, no division win. That's where I'm landing on that. All right. Well, then the drama here, I guess, I don't know which of these is more dramatic, though, the battle for 1-2, or who's going to finish third in the East. There's a interesting group of teams to look at in the division. We've seen them compete. Like, can Boston finally take the step forward everybody's been waiting for? They're getting Tanner Halkyard back.
In no world am I picking that team to make the playoffs ever in my life.
I love it. I mean, yeah.
They phone it in. Dudes miss games all the time. They play no defense. It's embarrassing.
Absolutely not. Toronto's got some great additions this year. Philly, I was super hyped on Philly last year. They couldn't quite deliver. So I think to me it comes down to Toronto and Philly. And I think I'm going to take Philly. They've got some good pickups. They're not losing a lot. It's funny that their notable additions in the power rankings list Tyler DiGirolamo.
Ty D. He's
How
back.
many times has Tyler? Yeah, how many times has he been added to this team? It's not.
Here
it's
he
not
comes.
happening.
I think
If he plays more than 2 games, if he plays more than 40 points, I'll be absolutely flabbergasted.
All right, I'm pulling up the stats. Okay, I'm pulling up the stats on Ty D. I mean, let's just remind everybody: Tyler DiGirolamo was, in my opinion, in college, the best player in college. The year they won the championship, he was better than Dylan Freechild. That's a fact. And he has never, ever been anything beyond that level. It is so sad because he's so talented. And when you see him play, you'll be like, wow, this dude is unbelievable. But here's the stats, okay? Right out of college, he played 9 games with DC. And then he played 11 games for Pittsburgh in 2015. Okay. Very productive year. 86 assists, 28 goals, 13 blocks. He was a plus 105. Insane numbers. Then he doesn't play in 16. In 2017, he's out of the roster again. Oh, he's back. 4 games played. Doesn't play in 2018. He was a plus 27 in 4 games, which is pretty awesome. 15 assists and 18 goals in 4 games. Then 2019, he's back. He plays 2 games. He had 3 assists and 2 blocks. I mean, he was still productive in the 2 games, but then he hasn't played since then. So,
Father Time is undefeated too. Guys, got to be 30 years old by now, right? Like,
I hope that he comes through and plays a lot of games. It would be great. He's very talented, but I expect that will not happen.
Look, I'm picking Philly, so I definitely want him to come.
You're
through.
all in.
I think this team had all the pieces last year. Yeah, they're losing Mike Ricotta, who I think was a nice contributor for them. But they still got Mott, James Pollard, Jordan Ryan. So I think that there's plenty of talent here, and this is a team that's really, really ready to break through. So I'm taking them to finish third over Toronto.
Here's the thing that I find interesting, and I think this is going to be a really fun battle. Toronto versus Philly for this final playoff spot, because Toronto, very young last year, but showed some flashes of solid young development. They were definitely not good enough to hang with the top teams, but they weren't horrible. And now they're adding Ty Barbieri. They're adding Mike McKenzie. They're not really losing anybody, and they're picking up, some of the better players from the Outlaws who, of course, the franchise is gone. And so I feel like, we saw Toronto just about beat Philly in Philly. And McKenzie has been a productive AUDL player in the past. Ty Barbieri is, super high quality Team Canada level player. I feel like they might get the job done. I mean, I don't think it's going to be easy at all for Philly, but that's going to be super fun. I'm going to take Toronto though. I'm going to take Toronto to start getting back to their winning ways. I think having Ottawa fold really helps them. And Montreal just looks awful now. I mean, they lost like so many of their key players. Who else is, there's not even anybody else in the conversation.
No, I guess, yeah, if you could squint at Boston and see it, so be it. But I'm out on everybody else.
Please.
I look forward to the inevitable Boston meme tweet about this with their meme.
Okay.
Look, they
show
meme
up
a lot.
and win some games.
Win games, but they do meme a lot. They do meme. They do be memeing, as the kids say. All right, which division you want to go to next?
Okay. Why don't we go out west? Also very interesting this year because San Diego's getting worse, Keith. And you've got LA taking a pretty big step forward. So that's nice to see. Will they make the playoffs? That's an interesting question. I feel like maybe they're favored to get into the playoffs in the third spot in the West. At the end of the day, though, this division starts with Colorado. I mean, that's for sure going to be your favorite. Colorado's getting a little bit better. We already talked about their championship aspirations. They're a step above everybody else in this division. When I look at those next two playoff spots, the questions for me come down to which three of Salt Lake, Oakland, and LA, because Oakland has quietly gotten better, Keith. A lot of hype about what LA has done, adding Giannis, and they also pick up Sean McDougal and Calvin Brown. I mean, they're definitely adding pieces, but they were 4-8 last year. And I look at Oakland and I'm starting to see like, okay, also a team that was 4-8 last year, but they pick up Mac Hecht, which if he plays a lot, is it possible he is as valuable, if not more valuable, than Pavlianis? Like Mac Hecht was and is one of the best throwers in the game. He was the number one thrower in college, whatever it was, 3 years ago. And I know he'd coming off kind of like not his best club campaign, but things were a little weird in Seattle. I feel like he could just have a monster season coming up here. So I'm actually going to take Oakland, Keith, to get that third playoff spot. Salt Lake for me is clearly the second best team in this division until proven otherwise. I think that battle between Oakland and LA is going to be fun, but I'm going to go with Oakland. I mean, they have some nice pieces. They pick up some revolver guys. Jake Dorn joins the team. There's a lot of talent there. Jacob Smith on the team. A lot of talent there.
And I think last year Oakland had the chance to develop some of the other players on the roster when they were a little less star-studded. Someone like Chris Long had a big year last year, and I think he's going to be in a great position to be successful this year. And also to your point about LA, why people are talking about all their additions. KJ Koo was the best player on that team last year. I'm sorry, KJ Koo is the best player on the Aviators, and he's gone. Like that you don't just eat that loss that easily. But I also think the Pavlianis addition is perhaps overshadowing some of their other additions, like Daniel Brunker, Jason Valet. These are good players who are going to be able to step in, and I think their defense is going to be much improved. Also, I feel like their season last year really took a downturn. I know it's weird to talk about because this is not a player I think people are ever talking about. Ever Shapiro was like crushing in his rookie campaign, and he got hurt and missed the rest of the season. I swear their offense got so much worse after that. If he's back this year, which he's supposed to be, I think that's actually going to be a big boost for LA. I think their record probably would have been a lot better with him in the lineup. So, and KJ Koo missed a decent amount of time last year too. So I think that hurt their regular season record, which is why it looks so bad. I think this really was more of a 6-6 quality team or 7-5. So I think that helps boost LA. So I like LA more than you do. I don't like them to win the division. I still got Colorado doing that. But I do think that they're not as much afraid of Oakland as you're making out to be. I've got LA finishing second.
I'm not saying I don't think it's like a slam dunk here. I mean, I think, like I said, I think LA is going to be the more trendy pick.
But I think they're a tier ahead of Oakland in my mind. And I've got Salt Lake actually finishing third. I'm worried. Salt Lake, I'm worried. I love Grant Lindsley coming in. I don't know how much he's going to play. That's part of my concern. And then losing like 2 or 3 of their best defensive players on a team that was already struggling to be strong on defense. That's worrisome to me. No Joel Clutton, no Ben Green, no Garrett Martin. Those are significant losses for a team that, while adding in good players, and I think is going to get a ton of development from their roster. They had some young guys, including Will Selfridge, who got hurt last year. So Salt Lake has some pieces, but I think a lot of those pieces are going to make their offense better, and their defense is going to continue to struggle unless Grant Lindsley is going to be there every weekend.
Let me tell you another reason I'm a little concerned about LA, okay? They get 2 home games to start their season. First, they play Colorado in their home opener. Arguably a good chance to steal a win. And then after those 2 home games, they have 5 straight road games at Salt Lake, at Colorado, at San Diego, at Portland, at Seattle. That is very tough. I feel like, if their talent lives up to the potential, they maybe go 4-1 on that stretch. But it's easy for me to see them going like 2-3 and feeling like things are a little dicey for them. Here's what's interesting. They don't play Oakland until the end of the season. They play Oakland twice back to back for the last 2 games of the year. I feel like it's going to be like kind of a win and in situation. It is weird. But it's going to be probably pretty exciting.
Yeah, it should be dramatic. I mean, I also think we were talking about Toronto and Philly fighting for the last playoff spot. They play in Philly, I believe, in the last game of the season. Toronto coming off a back-to-back of DC and Philly in that one. So, we could get some real drama at the end of the year.
Okay, now we haven't talked about some of these other teams. Seattle, San Diego,
Portland.
What are you thinking? Well, I don't want to spend a lot of time talking about this.
Can the jerseys be better this year? Last year was an atrocity. I hated it so much. I can't even. Could
Seattle or San Diego. Could they compete for a playoff spot?
Look, I gotta say, I can't get back on the Seattle train. I know that they have good additions. They also lost good players. I mean, they lost Adam Simon for whatever amount of time he was around. Shane Worthington, Noah Kuhlman, Declan Miller, who at times was the best player on that team. So their additions, I don't think outweigh that. And until this team frickin' shows up when they travel, I can't put any stock in them. I'm done because it isn't the talent.
They're the
team.
Boston of the West.
Yeah. And with a longer track
Keith,
record,
you were picking them to win the division last year, weren't you?
The talent.
They
if you just look
you.
at the roster, and assume all the players will be there, they look so good. But it just doesn't happen. So I'm done. And until they prove me otherwise, I'm not going there. No chance. I'm not even sure they're going to win 4 games this year.
What about San Diego?
Too much talent deficit. I do think that they'll show that they know how to win. And Paul Lawley's probably one of the most underrated players in the league. So I do think that they will remain good. They have a shot. If they are as good as Oakland or challenging LA, I guess that wouldn't be a shock for the 3rd spot, but I don't see them finishing above the 3rd.
I just don't feel like they have enough. Losing McDougal and Corbett and Goose and prayers up to Goose, by the way.
Yeah.
Who's coming off of the terrible motorcycle injury. But there's too many pieces missing. And I feel like the fact that they have players going to LA tells you what you need to know. The competitive players recognize that the chance to win this year is with LA and not with San Diego anymore. Nice run for the Growlers though.
Yeah, impressive. How about out south, Charlie? I think we have both established the favorite.
I mean, do we even need to discuss these Houston and Dallas? I mean, I'm going to, like I've said earlier, I'm going to be excited to watch Houston play. I want to see what they're about. I think they might be a fun team to watch, but they might be really bad. Dallas is going to be horrific. They've gotten way worse from a team that last year was terrible. So that is going to be ugly. They could lose games by 10, 15 goals this season.
They could be worse than Detroit. I'm just going to say it. They could be worse than Detroit.
It's possible.
We could have 2 teams fail to win any games and not even be competitive.
It's
maybe
ugly.
There's some sort of bet to be had about who has the best margin by the end of the year between these 2 teams.
Think about the fall from grace for this team. I mean, this is the team with a championship, and they get, swinging in there with Jimmy and Dylan and Kurt, and oh wow, the Roughnecks, incredible. And now they're like one of the worst rosters in league history. And I'm not even exaggerating.
We're going to see a lot of them playing against these Texas teams now. But all right, look at.
Anyway, let's talk about the good teams.
Ignore those teams.
The thing is, we know the playoff teams, right? It's going to be Raleigh, Austin, Atlanta, like that. Those are the teams. The question is the order. I think we've established
we feel like Carolina's first. Like, come on.
I think
Austin's
I'm taking
good,
Carolina,
but I think we've clearly established Carolina.
And I think it's actually fairly straightforward. I think Atlanta's gotten a little bit worse, and Austin is where they were, and that's enough for me to feel like confident that Austin is going to get that second spot.
I feel the same way. I also think that like the best players on Atlanta are aging a little bit. They also know John Stubbs. I know that he and Khalif were only there so much last year, but they're both talented players when they are there. So yeah, I think Atlanta's taking a step backwards, and I think Austin, whose core mostly is players who are like right in the middle of their prime, I think that they're going to be getting better. I think Austin has a better chance of pushing Carolina in some way. We've seen them have some pretty interesting matchups, more than I am afraid of Atlanta. If there was like another team, I might think about having Atlanta miss the playoffs. Like, I think they're taking that much of a step back potentially, but to me, this order feels pretty clear.
Well, I'm counting the number of games. So they play Austin plays 8 of their games against Houston and Dallas. So they're 8-0 in those games. Okay. Maybe they lose one. I can see that being 7-1. They like drop a weird game to Houston on some road trip where they don't send anybody. And then they have Carolina home and away. They play at Atlanta, and they play home against San Diego. So that's their season. I mean, it's not inconceivable that they win this division, because they get to play these bad teams 8 times. And you've got Carolina that has to play twice against DC. They could lose both those games. So I feel like, if Austin goes 1-1 against Carolina, they win at home and they lose on the road, and they win all those games against Austin and Houston, and they win at home against San Diego, which they definitely should, then, even if they lose at Atlanta, I can still see them winning the division. I think it's clear to me that because of the scheduling that there's just no way I can pick Atlanta to finish second.
Yeah, I'm with you. So,
okay.
Yeah, we can move on.
I guess that brings us to who do we think is getting out of these divisions? So, I guess, Keith, who do you have in your? Let's just quickly go through. I have New York and DC playing in New York for the East Division title. I have Chicago playing. I think I'm gonna take Minnesota to upset Indy in the Central game, and it'll be Chicago, Minnesota in the Central. I have Colorado and Salt Lake in the West, and I have Carolina and Austin in the South.
All right, that all makes sense to me. I'm just now realizing. So if I have Indy winning the Central, I can't have the other division winners also advance and Minnesota advance, because Minnesota, if they beat Chicago in the Central divisional round, they're not going to play against Indy in their playoff round, right? Is that right?
What are you talking about?
Okay, so right now, my original thought was I think
it will. Are you thinking there's crossovers? Because there's not.
Win. Okay, there's not. They play Indy, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, all right, then we can all dream. I would love it if we had crossovers. So we've discussed the concept.
Because if New York and DC can't advance, then neither can. Okay. All right. I'm
one taking, team from each division, Keith.
I'm taking New York. I think that DC gets them in the regular season. New York gets them in the playoffs. I've got Colorado and Carolina. I think we've already established why that is. And I'm going to take Minnesota. Messy Central. I don't see the division winner necessarily winning in the playoffs either. I'm going to take one of the more experienced teams to deliver there. So I'm going to take New York and Colorado to advance to the final. And as much as I would love to have this underdog story, I think it's very possible Colorado is going to be the second best team in the league. I just can't pick them over New York. I think the East team is just going to be so battle tested that they're just going to be in a great position to be successful in the playoffs too. So whoever gets out of that East between New York and DC feels like a favorite for me. So I'm taking New York, and I hate doing it. It's boring, but you just got to call them like you see them.
All right. So here we go. I'm taking Carolina out of the South over Austin. I'm taking Chicago to beat Minnesota in the Central game. I've got Colorado over Salt Lake. And I am calling the upset, and I'm taking DC to upset New York in New Rochelle to get to championship weekend.
So we both think the team that wins the East will lose to the other in the playoffs. Interesting.
Yes. Now, here's the thing. Think about what we saw this past season. DC was a coin flip game against New York, despite having a clearly inferior roster. Their roster is now not quite at the level of New York's top end, but I just feel like they have the pieces now to get the job done and get over that hump. And they have always played tough. And now they really have the tools that they need to win that game. Their offense is going to be nasty this year. How is New York going to get breaks against them? New York's D-line is not necessarily, a takeaway machine. And they lose Jabron, who's like one of their best takeaway guys. They're very efficient when they get the disc against worse teams. They mop up, and their O-line is extremely good. That's going to be an O-on-O game. It is very easy for me to see it being 2-3 breaks that decide the contest. And I feel like DC has added enough pieces that they can go out and win that game. And to me, that's the de facto, that's the championship game. The East Final is the championship game for the entire league. Because what's going to happen at championship weekend, I have DC playing Carolina. I've got DC winning that game. I've got Colorado playing Chicago. Again, Colorado takes that win. Colorado versus DC, comfortable win for the Breeze. In a little bit of a throwback to last club season with a revenge game.
I see that. I think Colorado and Carolina might be closer to DC and New York than it sounds like you do. And man, championship weekend would be better if we could get the four of them in the four teams we think are the top four in the same.
Well, I think
championship weekend, but
yeah, I mean, whether it's DC or New York, it's going to be fun games, and I think
it'd be a lot more fun though in the semifinal round.
Chicago's worse, but Colorado is better, and Carolina is arguably better. I mean, they're picking. We'll see about Carolina. I think they could be better. So I don't expect blowouts like last year.
Should be a good season though. I'm hopeful.
Should be a good season.
We got a competitive group at least.
Okay. I think the good news, Keith, is that there's more outside of the South. There's competition for playoff spots. It may not be, and like last year, there wasn't necessarily. Like the East was a foregone conclusion who was going to make the playoffs. The Central, I guess there was competition. The West, it felt early on like there was going to be like question marks, but then ultimately there really weren't. So I think there's more competition this year, which is a good thing, even though the bad teams are worse than ever.
Yeah, it's dark down there.
All right, we're going to take a break. When we come back, Amanda Dallas, PUL commissioner, joins us for her first time here on Deep Look. Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back.
Spring college season is here and the warm weather is on its way. That means it's reversible season. Breakmark is giving away free reversibles for teams that order a bundle. With prices starting at just $75, it's the best way to have your team looking game ready this spring. And reorders get a 20% discount. Get started today at breakmark.com.
Joining us now on Deep Look is the new commissioner of the Premier Ultimate League, as well as the co-founder and co-commissioner of Major League Quadball, formerly Quidditch, Amanda Dallas. Amanda, welcome to the program.
Thanks for having me.
Well, thanks for joining us. First and foremost, I've got to hear about how you found Ultimate. If you played, if you just happened to randomly come across it on social media because of the connections to Quadball, or how you found yourself in this universe.
Yeah, so brand new to Ultimate. I have some teammates in Quadball. I've had teammates in Quadball who played Ultimate and actually switched to Quadball. There's a lot of overlap, surprisingly, between the athletes, and obviously they usually commit to one or the other. We've had people leave Quadball for Ultimate, and I came across PUL a number of years ago, I think 2019 in their inaugural season, and I was following them more or less for the organization rather than the actual sport, because I felt there was quite a bit we could learn from them regarding gender specifically, especially since quadball is a mixed gender sport. And I've even taken some cues from them with the U.S. national quadball team. We run a player sponsorship program just like PUL does. And when it came to the commissioner role, I was following them on Twitter. I happened to have just left my startup job. And I was like, oh, I have the qualifications to do this, but I obviously know next to nothing about the sport. And I applied.
How nervous were you, or how big of a concern do you feel like it was going to be that you didn't have a background in Ultimate? And once you started engaging with folks from the Premier Ultimate League, how did you kind of get past that barrier?
Yeah, I definitely was like, it's absolutely could be a make or break that I am not part of the Ultimate community. I'm not delusional in that regard. We have had people, I've seen it in Quadball where they brought in an executive director once upon a time who had never seen the sport, didn't know anything, and it actually didn't work out. So that was lingering in the back of my mind. But I knew that I had this very unique match in my organizational experience and even just the size of Major League Quadball and how long I've been doing it. So I was pretty confident that I could be in the running. And, I never tried to feign that I do know Ultimate. And just talking to them throughout the process, they didn't seem too concerned. I think there was obviously the confidence there that they've all been involved in this forever and they could teach me. And here I am.
Yeah, that's kind of wild. I'm curious to know how it's gone so far and what you've seen, because you obviously have your experiences from organizing a league in quadball, and then you come over here. Are things in good shape? Are they kind of a mess? How would you assess the kind of state of the organization right now?
Yeah, I think the organization overall is in a pretty solid place. There's plenty of room for improvement. But I mean, it's moving along. There are things that PUL in particular, I think, does a lot better than even some of our quadball leagues do. The live streaming, the games are pretty much all live streamed. So far, they've been all live streamed. I hope they continue to all be live streamed. That's something that quadball in particular has just really struggled with for a variety of reasons. The players generally seem to really love the league that they're in. The culture seems to be pretty strong. The things that I think really need a little bit more help and that I look forward to doing more with is the marketing of the league. I obviously did my Googling. And there's just not a lot of coverage of the PUL. And I personally think that's just insane. Especially with the state of women in non-binary sports right now. It was truly shocking to me that more people weren't talking about this league. And, I obviously have done a lot with quadball and marketing it on even a global scale. And I understand some of the difficulties with promoting a niche sport. So that's an area where I think there's a ton of potential to grow and I'm really excited to work with. And some of the policies MLQ is very hardline with our policies. My co-commissioner did gameplay for years, and both of us have coached for a very long time and played for a very long time and have looked for every single loophole possible in the rule book and in policies ourselves, and sometimes resulted in new policies. So on that angle, I generally err on the side of stricter policies. And I think that's something that we really need to look into with the PUL. Some of the questions I've gotten, I'm I don't understand why something doesn't exist yet for this. But it's still a really new league. We were still trying to fix things, 5 years into MLQ. We still update our rulebook every single season with some policies and items. So overall, I think PUL is in a really good spot, but I think there's just a ton of room for growth, and I'm excited to work with them and to push that forward in the next however many months, years, etc.
Really quick, can you give us an example of a policy that you feel like is like lacks clarity in the rule book or needs to be added?
Yeah, even on like a very, very basic scale, they're the uniform policies. I had someone who asked and they were like, do we have to have our name on the back of the jersey? And I was like, well, I'll check the operations manual, but my opinion is yes, because how are we taking stats if no one can see the name on your jersey? And, what's the hard line with, do you have to wear your name and number? There isn't any. So on a very like basic level, like a uniform policy, I was like, I don't know. I would hate to be the stats person trying to take stats when there's no hard line there. So it's items like that where it's just like, it was probably something that nothing came up. People were wearing their names, people were wearing their numbers, etc. So no one ever thought they had to come up with it, and it's missing.
You don't want to know some of the wild stories that have come, or the debates that have come about what you can and can't wear at Ultimate. It's a long and sordid history, and I'm not surprised that came up as a topic. Just to get a sense of it, can you give our audience a sense of the scale of quad ball? I mean, how many players are playing quad ball in the U.S. and potentially even around the world?
Yeah, so quad ball is an international sport. World Cup is actually this summer in the U.S. for the first time ever. It's the fourth or fifth World Cup. COVID year, really. We were supposed to have one during the COVID year, so that kind of threw me a little bit. But it's in the U.S. Yeah, it's in the U.S. for the first time ever. And they're expecting to have, I think it's 18 to 20 teams in total. It's played in Malaysia, it's played in Uganda, it's played across Europe, it's played in a couple other Asian countries. Australia has a really strong team. Canada, Mexico, South America has a bunch of teams. In the US specifically, there's about 30 rec club teams. So those are outside MLQ, those are within USQ. And I think at this point, there's probably about 50 college teams. And there are unofficial teams across the US as well. In MLQ, we have 16 franchises across the US and Canada, and each of those have 30 players on a franchise roster. And then they have anywhere from 10 to 18 on a practice squad roster. So it's a fairly large sport. It's not as big as Ultimate. It's obviously not as accessible, which is a huge hang up for us. But it is played at a global scale.
So given that kind of difference in size and also just kind of the length of time that the sports have been around, quad ball was 2005, I believe, was when it was founded. And meanwhile, Ultimate is 50 years in, which by most sports, we're a baby sport too. So in some ways, maybe not that different. But how has that difference in kind of the size and establishment of what the sport already has, how is that potentially impacting how you're going to be able to affect your vision of what the PUL could be?
Mm-hmm. So obviously there's a bit more of a learning curve for me to catch up with Ultimate. But I really don't, I think that PUL, MLQ, Ethan's going to yell at me for this. I think that PUL has more active current potential. And I think quad ball has more future potential. I don't think it's emphasized enough how accessible Ultimate is. From what I've seen so far, like anyone can play it. It's versus like with quad ball, it's so expensive to get a set of hoops and it's so expensive to put together your team. And then you have to travel to tournaments because you can't just have a tournament in your backyard everywhere. So ultimately, I actually think like, the large scale makes it easier to implement a vision and easier to push it forward, even if it's one in, so many other leagues.
What can the PUL take from MLQ?
So one of the things that I'm already trying to push forward is specifically the event bidding process. Something that quad ball has done really, really well is in MLQ and USQ for most of our regional, national, and the series within MLQ, we don't pay for our event space at all. Cities are bidding on our events. Cities are funding our fields. They're giving us in-kind support. They're paying for marketing, etc. And it seems like PUL hasn't really jumped on board with that yet. I actually just got Eileen and Janelle to sign up for the Sports ETA Symposium to go in early May to talk to cities about the potential of bringing PUL to their backyard. And I can't emphasize enough that not only is that a significant revenue stream that can be created, but it's also exposure. And when you're working directly with cities, they're going to promote you significantly more than if you just go and you book the field and you show up.
So just to clarify, for home, I assume that Major League Quadball has home game type settings where you're in a stadium and a team visits another team's city and they play a game there.
Mm-hmm.
But are you talking about more like your championship event when you're talking about this city concept, or is that for literally all of your games?
We do it so in Quadball, we do it for all of our games. Everything is open to bidding. So we do have a couple teams where they return to the same field repeatedly. And usually that started out with this city or this facility bid on one of our events. We enjoyed the facility and then they come back every single year. Austin Outlaws are a good example. We've worked with Round Rock Multipurpose Complex for years.
Sure.
There's only been like 1 or 2 home series for the Outlaws that haven't been played there. And that was just due to like lack of availability.
Got it. Interesting. Do you play one-off matches or do you have more, mini tournament style settings?
For MLQ, it's an organized regular season schedule. We have 2 types. We have the series and we have a super series. Super series is the 2 teams face off, one's home team, one's the away. They play 3 games. And then we have super series, which are 3 teams from the division will square off over the course of 2 days. They'll each play 3 against each other. US Quadball specifically is more tournament based. You don't see a lot of series. It's more like 8 to 16 teams will all travel one weekend to a tournament, playing like a pool play into bracket format.
And US Quadball is more of like amateur play?
Yeah, it's college predominantly, and then you have recreational club teams.
Yeah, so that's the USA Ultimate equivalent in our world. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's funny that there are so many parallels in like having these kind of multi-level systems, and it can be a little confusing to somebody who's new. You know, my wife doesn't play, and when I try to explain to her, okay, I'm going to the national championship, but it's the national championship of this group of teams, and it's not the pro league, and the semi-pro league is different than this thing, and it's explaining it to newcomers has always been a challenge. But it's good that you already have the background with an environment that looks like that. And I remember listening to you talk with Bonesaw on the Premier Ultimate League podcast, and you'd use the term immersive for the experience that it creates for players to be in these cities that are welcoming them and are excited to have them. And I can think about Ultimate players. Like, I mean, we get excited when you get to the airport and there's a sign that says, welcome Ultimate teams or something, or you get to the tournament hotel acknowledges that Ultimate teams are there and people get excited. So an immersive experience, I think, would be really attractive to a lot of Ultimate players. What do you feel like is, when you look at the PUL from and potentially even just Ultimate at large in some ways, as a spectator sport, are there things that you see that are really strong or areas of weakness as far as the on-field action itself and marketing that to fans and players as well?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So one of the things I've seen so far this season that I really enjoy is the halftime element. Austin torched it really well. They did a drag show. And those little things like that are something that we in Quadball are still sort of struggling to fit in, because we don't really have like a hardline halftime. We have a 20-minute interval in a series where it's like a 1-minute stoppage before the flag runner comes onto the field. But it's also, our games don't really have a time limit. So it's tough to be like, oh, we can fit in this specific, youth Quadball team playing, or a drag show, or even just a skills event, because sometimes you run literally right into the next game. And that's been something that I think is really cool that I've seen in the PUL so far this season, which obviously can continue to be taken to the next level. You could get, more and more different types of performers. I've really enjoyed some of the signs that spectators bring to the events. I think that's very cool. One of the things we've sort of tried to add to Quadball that I do want to also try to incorporate into PUL Championship Weekend is having like a fan booth where specifically people can make those signs. They could do the face paint. There's maybe, some sort of materials and things that they could use as fans. But generally, it seems like so far the PUL events have been pretty accessible to spectators and have had an overall pretty good vibe.
So obviously, kind of at the foundation of all of this is that everybody's trying to make money doing this. Maybe the PUL isn't focused on like turning a profit necessarily for shareholders, but the jersey sponsorship program is obviously proven to be a very successful model for doing some fundraising at the beginning of the year. but
Mhm.
it's still mostly net negative for franchises right now. I know little about MLQ and kind of the funding model there, but how do you envision taking the league, assuming you stay in this commissioner role for the long term, towards, net positive cash flow?
Yeah.
Because the teams in particular are the cost of travel, the cost of renting fields. You already talked about the fields part, but like, what's going to get it there, and how is MLQ doing on that front?
Yeah, so quadball specifically is in a strange position, right? Because we were Quidditch up until last year, essentially. So we were sort of in a spot where it didn't matter what ideas we had. We could only make so much money and we could only do so many things with revenue. Otherwise, Warner Brothers would have come down on us and it would have been terrible. So we're in the spot where now that we've finally changed the name, we're starting to work with US Quadball directly to really figure out how we can diversify our revenue streams, what we can do next. We've had ideas. We have some that we've already started embarking on internally, and we're excited to implement those. But with PUL specifically, there needs to be, it's the Spark Notes version of this answer is essentially we need to figure out how to get even more community involvement. Like I said, the spectator element right now is pretty good at these games. You have enough people coming out to like make it an experience. But we really need to start selling these teams in the community as like your home team for the PUL, right? Like we want Philadelphia to support the Philadelphia Surge. And that's like a first step in bringing more revenue into this and diversifying the revenue streams is getting the entire community buy-in and really making a city look at these teams as their team, right? That's a big thing in sports. And with that, right, improving the type of merch that's available, improving the different price points of the merch that's available, pushing that more for sales. The event bidding, like I said, that's a huge revenue stream. I mean, that's easily thousands of dollars per event that you could be bringing in just with the city supporting you. What I want to do, right? I came in one day before the season, or one week before the season started, so I didn't really get a lot of time to talk to people as much as I wanted to. But one of the items I specifically noted for the off season is I do want to meet with every single team. And I want to meet with not just the owners or, the leaders of the team. I want to meet with some of the players and I want to ask their opinions and I want to hear from them what they want to see from the sport, what ideas they have. It's just, we have to make these ultimate teams into, the same thing as what you see with like your local baseball team or, even from a major league perspective. We just need cities to buy in. We need people and we need cities to love and want to be part of this experience and just really buy into these teams, because in the grand scheme of things, for a lot of sports, their teams are making a ton of money specifically off of ticketing and merch. You do also have sponsorships, right? And I said this earlier, there's not a lot of press coverage for the PUL. I also think that a lot of opportunities aren't being taken with sponsorships. So there needs to be a lot more outreach there, and there needs to be more concentrated effort on bringing in those sponsors.
You mentioned the relationship between Quadball and MLQ and US Quadball. Mm-hmm. So I know that certainly on this show and many people in the community have felt the same way, that there's not always been the most collaborative relationship between the 7 professional leagues that exist in the ultimate world. We have PUL, WL, AUDL, and just as you're well aware, and USA Ultimate, the governing body of the sport. Is that a relationship that you feel like could be enhanced and could serve to benefit both the PUL and the community at large? Is that something that you feel like is a focal point for you?
Yeah, absolutely. I think building those relationships, regardless of past feelings, are really important. US Quadball and MLQ did not have a good relationship for a while there. When we founded the sport, when we founded the league, Ethan and I were both players and leaders within USQ, and we actually were running an analysis site for the sport, and we were pretty critical of US Quadball. And we sort of became those people where it was like, if US Quadball was going to have a misstep, we were probably going to post about it. And the leadership definitely did not like us that much at that point in time. And when we started MLQ, there was this perception that we were trying to take over, which was absolutely not the case. And no matter how many times we said, we're not interested in rec club and we're not interested in college and we run our league on a totally separate calendar from all of you, it didn't matter. So it took us a couple of years to sort of build that relationship and build that trust. And now the two leagues work together on, most items. And we have, monthly meetings with the ED. I talk to her probably every single day for US Quadball. And I can't emphasize enough like how important that has been and how it's made a number of things significantly easier. And we've been able to cross promote each other. It's important. It's important. I think it's more important than some people realize. And I understand it's hard to get past certain things. But they're conversations I hope to have if I stay in this role.
Well, we're already on the march towards championship weekend. How do you feel like the season's going so far and the level of competition and, where things are headed?
Yeah, I mean, so far it's been exciting for me to watch as someone who doesn't know what's going on half the time. I'm really excited for championship weekend. It's been really exciting to see DC play as dominantly as they have so far. And then they're the home team for championship. In general, that's like a storyline that writes itself, right? And there's the favorite and there's always upsets that happen. And in general, just like getting to know these teams, getting to see some of the stars that have come out, the people on the streams who, they're just huge personalities. I've generally enjoyed it. From a league perspective, the teams have been really on top of their post-game items. They've been really on top of, getting those streams out there. We've obviously had some blips here and there. Everything's fixable though, and really happy with how the season's going so far.
Well, I want to say thanks so much for coming on and, very interested to hear and see how things progress from here. I guess I have one last thing. Social media and kind of communications has been a kind of a weak spot for the PUL for a little while. And maybe you've even noticed that if you've been following the league since 2019. It's kind of like a pretty big change during the pandemic. Is that something that's kind of like a point of emphasis at this point?
Yeah. So my background is in broadcast journalism. And I've worked in advertising. I've done some marketing and sales. So in general, communications and marketing, really important for me. Really something that I feel is important to emphasize. Another thing too is just video content, right? I've been speaking with Hogue Kepner quite a bit, trying to figure out what we're going to do with this season, what we're going to do with championship weekend. I've brought in my digital media director from MLQ. He went shot in Austin series coming in for championship weekend just to cover the entire event with us. I'm really trying to focus on improving the comms overall this season, but collecting photos and video content so that next season, it's not necessarily this like struggle and like we don't have a highlight to put out this week to tease this event. Yeah, very important. Something that desperately needs to be improved. Totally see it.
I have one to sneak in here, Keith. Charlie, before
you got it.
I think Charlie, you could probably guess what this is about. Now, Amanda, you're coming from a sport that was named something and then changed names. And the reasons here are pretty different. But there are some people who think that Ultimate is not actually a great name for a sport. And we do have the similarity of like, there's potential copyright issues. Warner Brothers and then the Waymo Corporation owns the copyright to Frisbee. Is there a possibility that you could champion the cause of changing the sport of Ultimate's name to a better name? And if so, are there any ideas that come to mind?
It is so hard to change the name of a sport.
I can't. Okay, never mind. Cut it. Editor, cut it. No, I'm just kidding.
If I never have to do it again, it's like too soon, basically. It was not easy in any regard. And man, when you're trying to come up with a name that starts with Q, you want to talk about difficulties, and it's you. I'm not interested. Not interested.
Sorry, Keith.
Breaks my heart.
Sorry, Keith. Well, Amanda, this has been great. We'd love to have you on for our subscriber bonus segment. I'd like to ask you some more about Quadball, actually, and kind of deep dive into that and the name change and what's been going on in the sport. You okay to stay on with us and do that?
Sure.
Awesome. All right. For now, we're going to leave it here. We're going to take a quick break. We'll be right back on Deep Look, and don't miss Amanda with us in our subscriber bonus segment, Out the Back. We'll be right back. Welcome back to Deep Look. Thanks to Amanda for coming on and being generous with her time. Keith, I think that she is a very interesting selection and logical choice, actually. Even though she doesn't know anything about Ultimate, that's not what you need from your commissioner. You don't need somebody who's a sport expert. You need somebody who's understands how to build your business. And I think that she brings a lot more of that than, hiring somebody from inside the sport who plays at a high level.
I also think that, Ultimate is somewhat homogenous, right? There's a lot of the same thought processes at work for a lot of people. So having an outside perspective in a leadership position, I think, could bring about some interesting results. And that's particularly true for an organization that has opted to kind of go their own way, to go away from traditional paths. And so having that extra piece of okay, here's another perspective on this in the room should pay dividends for them. I'm definitely impressed with Amanda and look forward to what she's going to be doing with the Premier Ultimate League.
So that's going to do it for today's show. We're excited for regionals preview episode coming up next week, and we're going to get our regionals pick'em contest going against our double OT friends. We've got a pretty good idea of what's going to be on the line. I'm not going to spoil it here, so it's going to be a real tough scene for the team that does not win the pick'em contest, Keith.
Yeah, if we end up with what we think we're going to end up with, I don't want to lose, Charlie. I'll tell you that much.
All right, we'll be back with you next week right here on Deep Look. For Keith Rayner, I'm Charlie Eisenhood signing off. Until next time, talk to you then.